All of a sudden, I saw a silver-white flash, like that of magnesium powder used in taking a photograph. High up in the sky, and immediately after it, I heard a tremendous sound similar to the explosion of some big fireworks. At 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on a populated city for the first time in history. Just 3 days after Hiroshima was bombed, a second Japanese city, Nagasaki, was hit with another atomic bomb. The dropping of the atomic bombs ended World War II in the Pacific War front, but they destroyed the cities, killed, maimed, and injured tens of thousands of civilians, with the aftereffects spanning generations. The dropping of the bombs also caused advancements in atomic and nuclear technology and led up to the Cold War. The dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan didn't just happen out of nowhere. There were many events and people that caused the decision to drop the bombs. Naturally, the atomic bombs could not be dropped if they were not created in the first place. This new superweapon was developed in the Manhattan Project, which was led primarily by Major General Leslie R. Groves and Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer during World War II. It was a 3-year project that produced atomic bombs codenamed Fat Man and Little Boy. Though originally developed for possible use against Germany, Germany had already surrendered by the time the first atomic bomb was tested. The bombs hence began becoming a possibility for use against Japan in the Pacific War front of World War II, considered by none other than the 33rd President himself, Harry S. Truman. Truman was president at the time that the bombs were dropped, and was one of the people who greatly influenced the decision to drop the atomic bombs. He was, in fact, the one who gave the order for the dropping of the bomb. At first a war advisor, he then became president after Franklin D. Roosevelt, the previous president during World War II, passed away. The 1945 Yalta Conference also influenced the decision to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki. FDR and other Allied leaders negotiated with Russia for the Soviet Union's assistance in the Pacific War front of World War II. This was a beneficial outcome for FDR and other leaders at the time, but Truman, who succeeded Roosevelt as president after FDR passed away, did not wish for Russia to enter the war. Truman sought to find a quick way to force Japan to surrender before the USSR could join the fight, so that he could ensure U.S. supremacy in the global hierarchy after the war. Other methods of ending the war were considered, such as continuing to firebomb Japan. However, like the firebombing, it was determined that many of the alternatives would not guarantee a quick end to the war. There was much debate about what to do and whether the atomic bombs should even be used. To help discuss, as well as provide guidance and advice on the topic of the atomic bombs, Truman formed an interim committee. It was one of the members, Ernest Lawrence, that suggested that use of the atomic bomb on Japan could convince the Japanese to surrender. After much debate, they determined that the atomic bombs should be dropped on a dual target, without any warning given to Japan prior to the bombing. And hence the decision was made. 2 Japanese cities that had not yet been targeted by the firebombing would become the targets for the atomic bomb. The dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a turning point in history, occurring on August 6th and 9th of 1945. The order was given just over a week ago, on July 30th, when Harry S. Truman sent a letter to his war secretary, Henry Stimson, stating, "Suggestions approved, release when ready, but not sooner than August 2nd. The atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima by the plane Enola Gay at 8:15 a.m. August 6th. 3 days later, on the 9th, Boxcar dropped the codename Fat Man bomb on Nagasaki at 11:02 a.m. People in Hiroshima and Nagasaki within the blast radius felt it almost immediately. Houses, buildings, and even people near the epicenter were instantly vaporized by the sheer heat of the blast. Mutilated corpses littered the streets, fire spread all over the cities, and few structures in the area of impact were left whole. Likely the greatest immediate effect was the social impact the bombs had on Japan. Though the death counts aren't entirely accurate, it's estimated that the death toll was 90 to 120,000 for Hiroshima and 50 to 80,000 for Nagasaki. Nearly all who were in the city were injured directly by the blast, or contracted what survivors referred to as the atomic disease. Those affected by the bombs started being referred to as hibakusha, or bomb-affected people. Hibakusha were discriminated against, often refused medical care, kicked out of public facilities, and considered ineligible for marriage, among other things. The Japanese surrender and Tokyo trials occurred soon after as a political result of the dropping of the bombs. The official surrender document was signed in Tokyo Bay aboard the USS Missouri on September 2, 1945. After the surrender, the Tokyo trials were held to try suspended Japanese war criminals. 28 Class A war criminals were put on trial, and 27 were found guilty. They received varying sentences, some including lifetime imprisonment or the death penalty. The atomic bombs were also a technological and intellectual advancement for the world. Other nations, the USSR especially, started trying to develop their own nuclear weapons, while the US worked to further the new technology. The US started the development of hydrogen bombs, also called thermonuclear bombs. Numerous other nuclear experimentations began after the power of nuclear technology was demonstrated at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Some short-term effects of the atomic bombs was the rebuilding of the cities, radiation damage from the bombs, and the USSR espionage. Surprisingly, the radiation damage in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was fairly short-term. Nearly all the radiation in Hiroshima and Nagasaki had decayed by 1946. The rebuilding of the cities was also over quite quickly as well. By the mid-1950s, the rebuilding had progressed to the point where Hiroshima and Nagasaki had returned to about the same size they were prior to the attack. While Japan was rebuilding, America was handling USSR espionage. Russian intelligence spies stole documents with information on nuclear technology to develop their own atomic bomb. One vital informant for the USSR was Theodore Hall, the youngest physicist recruited for the Manhattan Project. He had concerns about the U.S. having a monopoly on nuclear weapons after the war ended, and began to believe that the technology should be shared with Russia. In a statement many years later, he defended his actions, claiming that otherwise, the U.S. might have dropped the warheads on other countries without fear of retribution, causing mass destruction. The Cold War, surviving victims, and nuclear weapons threat are all long-term changes that have occurred because of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Though the detonation of the bombs only lasted seconds, their victims suffered throughout their lives. Many hibakusha had scars, injuries, chronic illnesses, or disabilities as a result of the initial detonation and/or radiation. The aggravation of radiation injuries and the constant anxiety over them caused great stress for victims and their families. The children of atomic bomb victims were afflicted as well, often being crippled, disabled, or afflicted by radiation sickness-related conditions. The damage wasn't just limited to the cities, the entire world was affected by it as well. Countries sought to obtain and further develop atomic weapons, beginning the deadly arms race known as the Cold War. It was primarily a competition between the US and USSR to have the biggest and most powerful stockpile of nuclear warheads. It spiraled out of control, with Russia being in possession of around 40,000 nuclear warheads at one point. Though the Cold War ostensibly ended in the 1990s, the nuclear threat still exists prevalently today. Currently, there are 8 nations known to have publicly tested nuclear bombs: America, Russia, Great Britain, France, China, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. Though nuclear weapons haven't been used in war since World War II, nuclear war is still a very real threat today. All in all, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were a huge turning point in world history, causing many changes and affecting many people. Though it is seen as positive in the sense that it ended World War II in the Pacific, preventing prolonged war and bloodshed, it was devastating to those in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It brought about the development of nuclear weapons, as well as the nuclear threat and the need for global policies on the use of nuclear weapons technology. The victims of the bombings, if they survived, were affected by the bomb throughout their lives, with the consequences spanning across several generations sometimes. Relations between nations were changed, and the U.S. was made a global superpower for having ended the war, but ended up starting new ones over the nuclear weapons. Summing up quite accurately the horror of the bombings, Captain Robert Lewis, the co-pilot of the Enola Gay, later stated, "As the bomb fell over Hiroshima and exploded, we saw an entire city disappear. I wrote in my log the words, 'My God, what have we done?'